Episode 5, the Average Joe Sports Show. Get your construction hat ready.
And let's talk about field storming. I've never seen one in my lifetime.
Maybe it'll happen at Memorial Stadium after Nebraska beats Michigan.
We'll also go around the horn and talk about how James Franklin takes his coffee.
Episode 5 is here. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. Chris Schmidt, along with Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, and Mr. Elijah Herbel. Guys can find us on Twitter, do so, or X. I got to get that fixed. At AJ Sports Pod is where you follow. Can also check in on the Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Show YouTube. Guys, it is Michigan week. Is there a faint yay at all with this matchup? Number 2's in town. We'll get there. We'll talk about Michigan State's opening. And, oh, yes, get your hard hat ready, fellas, because the South Stadium is coming on down. Who gets to push the button?
I'm just worried about Avery Hall. I mean, the southeast corner of Memorial Stadium, that's those south stands. I mean, that is right over Avery Hall, where many of us may have gone to journalism and broadcast school, you know.
I did. Avery Hall was definitely the spot for me to learn the trade. Would it be the worst thing in the world if Avery Hall came down with the South Stadium? It was ready in the 90s, I think.
There's a lot of memories in those halls,
I
though.
took 2 of my least favorite classes ever in college at Avery Hall, so if it comes down, it comes down. I took computer science, like an intro-level course, which absolutely murdered me. Turns out computer science, not for me. Can't do programming. And then I also took a cultural anthropology class, which the professor and me just didn't quite get along. Mm-hmm. So I sat in the back and just watched the clock move. And so, yeah, not good memories in Avery Hall. If it comes down, it comes down.
I think there's already some anxiety, or I'm feeling some anxiety, and I'm not even invested in this. And when they do push the button and South Stadium comes down, how East Stadium can't come with it, because then all of a sudden, it's a huge problem, but you got a huge problem on your hands. I mean, Trev Alberts is talking on Thursday at this press conference 1 week ahead of the Board of Regents meeting to presumably approve, to get the plan on a $450 million renovation that will span from January of 2024 until they hope, July or August of 2026. To renovate Memorial Stadium, make it a better fan experience. They're going to remove South Stadium in January 25. So you push the button and you bring down South Stadium and you cross your fingers and hope that nothing else comes with it.
There's people who make a lot of money to be able to plan those demolitions, though, and make sure nothing else comes down.
And you're talking about a 102-year-old building at that point. I'm sure that it'll be fine. Famous last words.
You know, construction and destruction geeks are uniting for that day when the South Stadium comes down. The South Stadium stands come down, and then the construction begins. It is a fascinating process, no question. It is an undertaking that are people ready for. $450 million. That's the price tag that was announced this week. You know, those dollars tend to go a little bit higher than that. But it is something that if Nebraska wants to continue to play at the big poker table, with real cards and real chips, it's something that has to be done.
It's $500 million. I mean, it'll be $500 million when it's done. I mean, $50 million is like throwing another coin into the fountain at the end of this thing. Hey, it's not my money. One thing that Trev said today that intrigued me, and we didn't have to ask more about this in the future. It seems like an investigative piece that I can do at the Athletic sometime in the next 2 years. He said, we don't know what's under South Stadium. That's what are you talking about?
That's ominous. That's like Jimmy Hoffa.
Right. What's under there? I mean, are there a bunch of bodies, or what are we talking about here?
It's an Indian burial ground. That's the curse of Memorial Stadium over the past 15 years.
Perhaps find us all on Twitter at Mitch Sherman. Can follow him at Bill Doleman, at Schmidt_radio, Chris Schmidt, and Elijah Herbel at Herbal Essence. And make sure you check in on the Average Joe Sports Show Twitter feed as well at AJ Sports Pod. Guys, it's exciting. We all grew up going going to Memorial Stadium at one point or another. I smile and think about the time with my family in West Balcony. This is pre-new Skybox. This is pre-1998. This is pre-Jack Pierce selling every Skybox known to man at the time, going to big donor, to little donor, to medium donor, and getting it done and seeing that go up on the West Stadium. Then here comes the East Stadium. Our dear friend Mark Cranack, the Cranack section is where he and his boys sit. And then you look at South Stadium right now. And Bill, I know you spent a ton of time in your career at South Stadium with good old Bob.
Well, that was where the athletic department was housed. And you think that, the athletic director's office and the football coach's offices were all in that little South Stadium office building underneath that massive structure that was an add-on to Memorial Stadium many years after the construction of the original facility. But you think about where college sports was 30, 20 plus years ago, and the massive corporation that it is today, and the need to compete with facilities with everybody else in the country who is playing the kind of game that you want to play. And that's why you have all the renovations that have taken place in the north, and why you have the new locker room and football offices that are right next to the NU Coliseum. But you think back to those humble days when Nebraska was having so much success on the field, that it was just that little building where everything was pretty much taking place, and it all seems so Spartan right now compared to what we have.
Yeah, my first journey into South Stadium was to meet with Bob Devaney as the athletic director emeritus in 1991, 92. I was at a journalism camp for high school students and made a request to come over and talk to somebody important. I think that's probably how I phrased it as a 16-year-old.
Did you write a letter?
Yeah, I think I maybe made a phone call, or I possibly wrote a letter asking if I could come in and speak with an administrator, and I got time with Bob Devaney. They gave me Bob Devaney, the emeritus, the AD emeritus.
How was it?
In my memory, it was amazing. Bob just kind of talked my ear off about whatever I wanted to what roads I wanted to go down. I probably had some hot takes or some headlines that came out of the thing that I didn't.
Why are you still running the damn option?
Didn't even know about at the time. I don't think my news radar was quite up in those days. But the numbers that are going to give people some hesitance, some anxiety over the next months and really years to come are what's going to happen here with the attendance figures at Memorial Stadium, or at least the capacity. Right now, the capacity of Memorial Stadium is just under 83,000, and it's gone down in recent years because they've widened seats in various parts of the stadium. You had 87,000 as the announced figure for the Louisiana Tech game last week, so you put an extra $4,000 in there for staff, players, media, etc., and that number at the end of this project is going to be in the range of 73 to 75,000. So 10 to 12% reduction just because of everything that they're going to do, not just in the South Stadium, but in other parts of the stadium too, to enhance the fan experience, to add premium areas, to widen seats, to put chair backs in new spots. Really the South Stadium is going to be rebuilt in a way that is modern college football, much different than what it looks like today. And then in the 25 season, they hope only the 25 season, but Trev Alberts is prepared for it to go into 2026. You're looking at 60 to 61,000 for the capacity of Memorial Stadium because the whole South Stadium's gone. So that's going to lead to some really interesting conversations and some difficult moments that Nebraska has to have with its ticket donor base. And, will be a hot topic of conversation between now and the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, maybe they could just bring in the wooden bleachers from every Class C school around the state, and people could sit on those for a year. Or you could just have another Buck Belcher Stadium rock pile, and people could gather on that for football games.
Bring in the bleachers for the old Texas series with Van Horn 100 years ago.
I mean, the whole South End is going to be open, so it's going to be a horseshoe for a year, for at least 1 year. And the second year, even if they're not ready to open up the South Stadium, the bowl would be enclosed again. But what a weird sight that's going to be in 2025 to have the South End gone from Memorial Stadium. Maybe you could have some raised seating up there in the parking lot right now, Lot 4 for Memorial Stadium on the south side. Put put a few thousand people out. I don't think it's going to be a construction zone.
Sell tickets to sit in offices at Architecture Hall, maybe.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Well, and one of the questions I had when this was announced was for that 2025 season, maybe even longer, where does the student section go?
It's a great question, and Trev didn't really have an answer for it today.
He's working on it.
And that was one of the things that I don't want to say disturbed me about the press conference. That'd be a little too dramatic, but for something that's been in the work for 18 months, I did come away with a lot of questions. I know it is pretty fleshed out at this point, but there are still a lot of questions. What happens in 2025 and beyond? What does this renovation actually look like? Because Memorial Stadium is an important part of the
student experience.
The student experience, yeah. What does it look like for the students moving forward? I mean, and I know the students, they hit the buzzwords today in terms of, well, it's going to be more affordable for fans. It's going to be a great student experience. We want it to be luxurious for some of these fans. Like, they hit a lot of buzzwords, but I still have a lot of questions about what this is actually going to look like in practice.
Here's what stuck out to me, and there's a ton that Trev covered, but his tone when he was talking about any of you ever build a house. Yeah, you build a house, they tell you it's done in October, you're waiting till May. Mm-hmm. And maybe that was a personal experience of his. I've had the good, the bad, and the ugly of house building.
Hey, my dad builds houses always on time.
Okay, there we go. Mr. Herbel.
Never once been late.
Get him in here to be the contractor for Memorial Day.
Do it now. Sign him, and we'll get it going. But now, listen, I remember taking Carson to his first ball game. And because I'm such a big spender, it was Idaho State. And but I remember taking him to the bathroom, and he was little, and I remember having to hoist him up for the trough. So it was one of those projectile, let's hope we don't short the free throw here. And it worked out, and he thought, let's do that again, Dad. I was like, well, keep drinking Mountain Dew, kid. But the troughs presumably will be gone. It's going to be more of a luxurious bathroom set up. You're going to be able to get point of sale. Trev touched on with the concessions, because he's right, man. If you ever try and go based on where you're at to go get a slice of pie and a Pepsi, you're going to miss part of the ball game. Can you fix all of that? And you've got to try and please about everybody, because you've got different factions here that have different suggestions. I won't call them complaints, but they're different suggestions.
The hope that he's going to sell is that people are willing to put up with some pain and frustration,
short term,
and angst, disruption. These are all words that he used today. He asked for grace and patience. Body language, the tone for Travis, he understands that they're in for a rough road in that 25 season and maybe even a year beyond.
He's not even on the field.
And the hope is that people understand what the future can look like. But if you're a student, you're here for a finite amount of time. And say
some of us.
And those are your future those are your future donors too.
As he mentioned.
Right.
He understands. So they're going to have to find some way to keep the students involved, even without a South Stadium in 2025. And he made it a point to mention that when it reopens, hopefully in 26, that the students are going to be in better position. They're going to be down near the field and be able to represent Nebraska in a way that is different now than what you have with kind of the mishmashed student areas in the south and the east corners. So, hey, if you're carrying a backpack around campus in 25, I don't know that the thought of the students being in a better spot in 2026 or 2027 is going to make you feel all that much better. But somebody has to pay the price, and the students are their tickets are the cheapest in the whole place, so they may be out of luck.
Here's the dynamic that people have not talked about really since that survey went out and since Matt Rule got hired. I mean, and now today, how good is Nebraska football going to be in 2024, 25, 26 as this transpires? If Matt Rule has success and the trajectory, I think we all feel is positive in the corporation that he has set up, in the plan that he has put in place, and if that thing starts to come to fruition, okay, now what's the fork in the road? Are fans going, all right, we're taking the right steps in the field. I'm willing to endure the pain and not be able to go maybe because I know this is going in the right direction, and when I can get in there, I'm going to be there 100%. If things don't go well over the next couple of years, people may be like, yeah, we don't care. build all you want. We're not going anyway. We're not getting what we were promised. And, I mean, that's a dynamic that is really going to play out as to what the fans, how much angst there is.
Once you get kicked out of the stadium by the school, in order to get back in, it better be a product worth seeing.
Exactly.
Because right now, people are going, in a lot of cases, out of habit, because it's because what they do, it's because they're grandfathered in with their situation as a donor, and all that stuff is going to change. They want it to change for the better, and they're speaking the right words about making this an affordable fan experience, and it's going to be a better stadium situation, but they are putting a lot of faith, and this is a big gamble, behind this coach. And it illustrates what Trev has already talked about with the changing landscape of college football and how Nebraska has to win in order to stay relevant and stay even a part of the Big Ten. Now you add this element to it about what they're doing with the stadium, and wow, this is an important 2 or 3 years for Matt Rule in this program.
But it should be noted that if the gamble pays off, I think you can look back at Nebraska's media payouts from the Big Ten are going to be huge in this project, and that you look at the entire project as a whole. I mean, it's probably not possible if Nebraska doesn't make it to the Big Ten. Hiring Matt Rule, the amount of money you have to pay him, the amount of money that's going into the stadium, the amount of money that's going into a new facility, all made possible. And by new facility, I mean the Go Big Red project that has just recently been finished.
The
buyouts. All of this made possible by moving to the Big Ten. And I think you can look back at Tom Osborne and his vision for the future from over a decade ago now. That's kind of made this possible.
Well, and I think there's risk, but there's the reward to re-energize and kind of relaunch what your history is versus kind of writing your new history of a team that is competitive, that's tough, that's physical, that you like watching, and that can go win some big games.
You can't afford not to do it.
You have to.
The reality
you have the
is,
resources to do it.
If you want to be in the Big Ten, you got to play with the big boys, and you got to do this. And, you could go smaller on the stadium renovation, but the reality is that the stadium in its current state is not going to get you to the next level. You're going to need to do something. You have to modernize it, and if you just let it sit, it's going to be in a state of disrepair by the time you get around to realizing that you're past the point of when it needs to be done. So they have to do it, and they're in a good spot. They're fortunate, and because of their own foresight, that the Big Ten is bringing them so much money through television. Otherwise, you wouldn't, even at $450 million, 125 of that is coming from athletic department revenue. And they are fortunate that the Big Ten is providing so much.
And no taxpayer dollars will be involved in the process.
I mean, that's what's nuts. That's how good Nebraska's been with their savings and piggy bank. It's
amazing to me.
They've been able to do it and be on their own credit card and not have to borrow from mom and dad ever.
It was interesting to hear too that Nebraska did borrow $50 million from Central Lending at the university for the Go Big project that's in the final stages now of being done. By the way, $165 million project in its own right, which was the biggest project in the history of the athletic department, remains the biggest project of the history of the athletic department until this $450 million behemoth gets approved. So they will have paid off the $50 million in lending for the Go Big project before they get started on this stadium renovation. Pretty impressive.
That's really impressive. Average Joe Sports Show. Catch us and download us, Spotify, and, of course, iTunes. If you want the audio part, the video right here for you on YouTube. The AJ Sports Show is where you can subscribe to that. Find us on Twitter/X at AJ Sports Pod. That's Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Guys, we're talking about construction and building, and that's part of the theme for Matt Rule Year 1. We turn to Michigan, and they come in at number 2. The buzz has been minimal. It's grown a little bit as the week's gone on, but the topic of big wins, big opponents, and what you do if you do pull the upset, and that is, do you find your way onto the field?
Well, to tie it back into this project, maybe this new student section's field level, easy access for storming the field. I hope that's first and foremost on the mind of Trev Alberts, because, I mean, the student section experience, you're high up there. You got a big drop down if you want to make it down the field.
We always rigged the lottery back in the day, where I had 3 or 4 guys I worked with, shout out Hinky Dinky, may it rest in peace. They were guys that went to Pius, and they just kind of look at the lottery number they drew, they put it back in, they draw another lottery number, put it back in, and then eventually we were about 20 rows up on the east side for my 2 junior seasons of college.
See, that's interesting, because my student section experience was first come, first serve, making it into the student section. You had a huge line outside the one gate for the student section. And if you got there late, if you wanted to get some drinking done before the game, you were just going to have to be way up there in South Stadium. It was just the risk you played. And if you wanted to get a low seat, you're showing up 2.5 hours before kickoff, and you're making the mad dash in and finding something to do for 2 hours before kickoff.
Or you have a buddy that's wearing long pants when it's 97 degrees out.
I was that buddy.
Okay. But Mitch, let's go with you on the field storming. And we're racking our brain when the last time it happened, and I don't know that it'd be something that you'd be that surprised at if Saturday turns into upset Saturday for Nebraska.
Yeah, we're just jumping right past the analysis here and saying Nebraska has won the game.
What you want to dive into the analysis?
You got a game-winning touchdown from Heinrich Harburg to Billy Kemp to Fedoni, going 4 for 4 straight games with touchdowns for the big tight end from Council Bluffs. That's how it's gonna end.
Prediction time with Mitch.
Nebraska's won the game. This is not my prediction, but if that happens, yeah, I'm a big yes on whether the field gets stormed. I mean, Nebraska has not had a winning season since 2016. So all of this act like you've been there stuff,
They've been there in a while.
They haven't been there. So Michigan's number 2 in the country. It's Jim Harbaugh. That would be fun to run past him. I'm sure a lot of people would try to find find Coach Harbaugh. Now, I wouldn't advocate.
I would not even mess with him.
I would not advocate going near him. I'd say let him go, let him out of the field, and then have your fun. Schools have gotten adept at making their goalposts tamper-proof. At Colorado, when Nebraska was out there this month, the goalposts are just lowered immediately.
They're like the old driveway rim.
Yeah, so I think that the younger demo, they don't go after the goalposts anymore. That's not really the fun thing to do. Now, maybe at Nebraska it would happen because Nebraska fans don't know how to storm the field. It's been so long they've forgotten. And in 1992, you tore the goalposts down, so perhaps you do that again in 2023. But I'd say go out there and have a lot of fun if Nebraska can pull off what would be the upset of the decade, at least in its history.
Here's the scene. As soon as Nebraska, the clock's hit 0, Nebraska wins 23-20 on that touchdown pass that Mitch is predicting, jokingly, of course.
Book it. Is that the overs? 23-20?
That would hit the over, yeah.
Yeah, because it's 39.5. But and as soon as the masses find their way onto Memorial Stadium, DJ needs to hit "It's Like Rain," that opening sound from Alanis Morissette as Harbaugh is walking off the field.
Give him what he wants to hear.
Yeah, at least the old billboard from T.O., "You'll never lose in a nicer place."
Yeah. Well, fans aren't going to go up to the goalpost because they got their phone in their hand. They got to take a selfie and they got to get video. So that's the furthest from their mind. But I think especially the students, they've not experienced it. They're pent up and they've seen other places do it. So it's going to get done if it happens.
Well, I'm 24 years old. Never in my lifetime have I seen the field get stormed at Memorial Stadium. Never in my lifetime have I seen the field goal posts come down. Never once in my lifetime, dating back to 1999. And that includes games I don't even remember when I was 1 or 2 years old. The 2001 game against Oklahoma, the goalpost didn't come down. You have to go back to the mid-1990s, I think, just racking my brain here of the last time that
it's 92 Colorado, and yet some guy in a giant bunny suit jumping up and down on the crossbar.
And I've seen some people saying, because that was the Halloween game against Colorado, correct? I've seen some people saying 95 Oklahoma, the final game of the Big 8, the goalpost came down. I've looked up the game on YouTube. I couldn't find any video evidence of the field goal post coming down. So I think you might have to go back to 92 Colorado.
Nebraska was so great that year that it would have been a travesty to tear the goalpost down for anything other than a national championship, which wasn't being won at home. Yeah, I'd gladly be proven wrong on that if somebody has the evidence of it. But I was at that game and don't recall it.
I don't either.
Yeah, I was also at the 92 Colorado game as a high school senior, and I think I maybe tried to make my way down to the field to help out.
What stopped you?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Just the mass, probably.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And I was sitting in the student section because I had friends who were in school. But I may have made it down to the turf. Definitely did not hang on the goalpost, though.
Well, it's dangerous, honestly. Hanging on the goalpost like that. And I think they make those goalposts more collapsible now, so they should come down easier should the fans try to do so.
Yeah, they don't snap like they used to.
Yeah, back in the day, the danger of that.
Does Nebraska have the lowerable goalposts? They may not.
Great question.
They may not, because they've never had to
concern themselves with it.
Correct.
That would
They do when the posts snap in the old days. It was a loud snap, and you'd be not me, but the students would be hanging on those things, and they would be rocking them back and forth, and then finally at the base or in the upright section, whichever one gave first, it would crack and just pop. It wasn't something that you wanted to be near when it happened.
Such a Gen X thing to endure, too. You know, back then, that generation, my generation, we didn't care. All right, we're snapping. Yeah, I mean, they're coming down, and we don't care how it goes down. We don't care who's on the other side of it. That's just what we did.
There was enough people around though, where the hands would go up, and it was well executed, where no one got whacked in the head.
Well, see, that's the problem. Now Husker fans nowadays, the students, they don't know how to bring down the goalpost safely. They've never seen it before.
Did it travel?
There isn't a way to bring them down safely.
did it travel up on O Street to the rail? Is that where it went?
I don't know where it went, but it went to O Street for sure. It traveled.
Yeah. And then legend has it did some of it end up in Holmes Lake?
I think that's
a legend, yeah.
I've heard that story, too.
I found a section of goalposts. I can't remember from which game it was. It was at an antique store in Lincoln, a little, probably 6-inch long.
Next to Bear Bryant's hat.
And on it was goalposts from Nebraska. I think it was a Nebraska-Oklahoma game from way back when.
Sure,
it had the final score written on there, and they had some crazy price listed on it. I didn't buy it for a 6-inch piece of metal that had apparently a story behind it.
Didn't take it to Antiques Roadshow to have it appraised.
The old relic of the goalpost.
It actually came from Seacrest Field.
Mitch, you just ruined it, man.
Not like you can get the certificate of authenticity on that.
I need a photo of you running from the police circa 78. We are here with the Average Joe Sports Show. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find us as we are on YouTube, the AJ Sports Show, the AJ Sports Pod, where you find us on Twitter/X. Can give us a follow there, give us a subscription, and let us know what you think. I love doing this, episode 5. We'll dive into 2 seconds of analysis before we get into the games of the weekend. Quite a few ball games to check out after last weekend's kind of great schedule between Notre Dame and Ohio State and some of the other ball games. Florida State with that outright win, Elijah, over Clemson on the road. But this thing is just a tough hill for Nebraska, where their program's at, Mitch, and where Michigan and Nebraska kind of collide here. It'll be physical. It might be a fast ball game, but it's going to be downhill. That's the one for Nebraska to run the football. That's what Michigan is.
Yeah, Michigan is what Nebraska wants to be. Simple as that. That's probably the best piece of analysis you can come up with. We heard from Matt Rule on Thursday, and sounds like the quarterbacks aren't in much of a different place than where they were headed into Louisiana Tech. Maybe Heinrich Harburg is a bit banged up because he's played a second game and was somewhat tight and didn't come back into the contest after the lightning delay last week. But he's in good shape, and Jeff Sims is not 100%. So got to think that it's going to be Harburg's show again out there on Saturday afternoon, and he's going to have to do some things to open up the offense for Nebraska, because the option and the 41 pitch and the various things that they dusted off out of the old closet in the Mushroom Gardens. I think that's where they found the playbook that they went with last week.
Under South Stadium.
Yes, they were. That's what's under there. It's Bob Devaney's playbook or Tom Osborne's playbook.
That's what they're going to dig up, right?
Yeah, that's not all going to work against Michigan in the way that it did against La Tech. So Nebraska has to have some fortunate things happen, and probably a mountain of them to win this game.
Well, and simply put, Mitch, like Nebraska needs some fortunate things, but also I think the tall task that you need to have if you want to beat Michigan is you have to go outrush them. You have to outgain them on the ground, because I think they have the advantage in the passing game, despite the fact that it hasn't been too clean for them this year through the air. They still have the advantage there. Yeah. You would think they have the advantage running the football too, but you have that great rushing defense. You need to go outgain them on the ground. That's going to be your game plan for victory. I don't know how possible it's going to be for where this Husker team is at right now.
Yeah, this is a test of that rush defense to see what it really is, although I would caution against reading too much into this game when you're grading the Nebraska rush defense.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how they are against Illinois. Let's see how they are against Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State moving forward. Much like you can't read everything into the performance that Nebraska put out with its rush defense in these first 4 games, I don't think you then flip it and say, well, they gave up 220 yards rushing to Michigan, so it must not be the real thing. I want to see it over the course of an entire season.
And this isn't Michigan's offensive line against Nebraska's defensive line. This is a 3-3-5, and we have seen the speed and the ability of the linebackers and defensive backs even, but mostly those linebackers get to where they need to be to make plays defensively. So the angles that they take, the speed that they have, Bayer's been fantastic. If Reimer plays, that's a bonus for Nebraska. Henrik has played, I think, really well when he's been out there. There have been a Singleton, of course, has been one of the stars. Omar Brown. There are so many guys that have played at a very high level to help that run defense become as good as it is. It's not just Hutmaker clogging things up. It is a whole total team effort. And we've talked about the number of players that played defensively. Nebraska does not have a lot of tread loss on the tires on the defensive side, which will pay off now. It'll certainly pay off when you get into November, when you don't have that disparity of players taking 75% of the snaps and the backups get 25%. It's much more balanced. They're fresher. They know what they need to do to make plays. And so I think that's a significant thing to stopping whatever Michigan wants to do on the offensive side of the ball.
Michigan and its quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, went against the 3-3-5 in the college football playoff semifinal last year. And while TCU won the game, it was 51-45, and Michigan had 528 yards of offense. So 7 yards per play. They know how to play this thing. This isn't going to be like Minnesota, where Nebraska was able to surprise them, I think, with the defensive looks that it put out there. Michigan's going to be well-schooled in how to attack this defense. So all kinds of challenges for Tony White and everybody else on that Nebraska sideline.
That equalizer in the TCU game was how many turnovers?
Oh, they were all over the place. Michigan turned it over inside their own 5-yard line multiple times.
At least 3.
Yeah.
So
get that, Nebraska.
They got to get
in the game plan.
They got to get turnovers before the end of the game, and there has to be a Nebraska forcing a turnover in that first quarter or something to get something that'll get the crowd into it too. Just to force a turnover early, not late.
And one thing to note though, Nebraska's red zone defense thus far this year has not gotten off the field without giving up a point. Opponents are perfect in the red zone, at least getting field goals, if not touchdowns. Michigan has not been perfect in the red zone thus far this year. Could be something to note moving forward. That TCU story of Michigan getting into the red zone, not coming away with points, that's continued into 2023 for the Wolverines, even against some lesser opponents. So maybe Nebraska can make some hay there, but something's going to have to change because Nebraska, once teams get into the red zone, have been perfect at getting points on the board.
Just such a different feel 2 years later from what almost was that night game, how electric it was, the light show, the atmosphere, the emotion with Nebraska-Michigan. Last year was really rough in Ann Arbor. You come back here now, and it just feels, don't get embarrassed, right? That's the thought bubble from a lot of Nebraska fans.
Yeah, I'd say final thought. Michigan's been to Lincoln twice since Nebraska joined the Big Ten. Just twice, which doesn't seem like the right number. But you have a 23-9 Nebraska win against Denard Robinson and that crew back in 2012.
Knocked him out.
When Michigan was not what it is now. And then you have the 32-29 Michigan win where it just got out lucky to be alive in 2021. So that's it. They've played competitive games. Nebraska's held up its end of the deal in Michigan's trips to Memorial Stadium. So That's all you got to do, Matt Rule, is just keep what's been going on for the last decade.
Let's talk, let's stay in the state of Michigan and get to Michigan State, the Average Joe Sports Show. That job is open. And how desirable is Sparty? It's a good job. It's a high-paying job in the Big Ten, and there's a boatload of candidates, Mitch, that have been mentioned.
Yeah, I don't know how good of a job it is. I think it's a tough job because you got this big program over to the east in the Big Ten in Michigan. You've got Ohio State and the state down. You've got Penn State that's kind of rolling right now.
Notre Dame in the area.
Right. It's an interesting job, and I think the way that coaching candidates look at this one is going to be kind of telling of how the landscape sets up in the new Big Ten, because now you've got all these other schools to contend with from out west, and Michigan State is it's in the middle of the pack, and they've had some success recently. This is a team that's been to the college football playoff in the 4-team era, but it seems so far away from that right now. In fact, it seems so far away from what Mel Tucker did at Michigan State just a couple of years ago when he turned that thing around with Kenneth Walker and that great class of transfers. I look at this, and I think a guy like Lance Leipold at Kansas would not necessarily be tempted to jump from Kansas. We're talking about Kansas football to go to Michigan State because I don't think it's a better football job right now.
That's a job that seems to me, or a school or football program comparable to like Texas Tech, that has the potential to be really good but not a championship contender. Or maybe in the SEC, I hesitate, Auburn, or maybe a Mississippi State type program where
more like that.
Yeah, kind of has that blue collar feel, the chip on the shoulder pads and that kind of thing, where we can be good. What Tucker did in that 11-win season was pretty remarkable. But for whatever reason, he hit the brakes on his own program. And now, they've tossed him to the side for other reasons. But you certainly didn't get any sense that coming into this year that they were going to turn that thing around, that it was going to be more like last year than 2 years ago. So who's going to be tempted to take that job? Is it like a Jonathan Smith at Oregon State, Jake Dickert at Washington State because, things are changing with their programs? I don't know. It's really intriguing as to who is going to get it and who wants it. And you don't see a lot of names right now.
There's a list. Elko's having a great couple of years at Duke, New Jersey guy, super talented. And, Duke has just kind of been a stepping stone for really good college football coaches. I think a Spurrier specifically 100 years ago, but he got his head job there and then got to Florida. But if I'm serious about a guy that's won in the Big Ten, and you can love him or hate him, but he's won in the state of Michigan, Western Michigan, and I think he wants out of this NFL shadow. I think P.J. Fleck would absolutely want to move on because of just what's being overshadowed. And two, he knows that part of the country. He's won in the Big Ten at Minnesota, and he got to a New Year's Day 6 at Western Michigan with some guys he developed that turned into NFL guys that the other two big schools in Michigan overlooked. So I don't know if he'd hop Big Ten schools, but that'd be a phone call I'd make.
I think he'd do it. I think he'd look at it, and I think the determining factor for him would be, is he able to bring everything with him, his oars and his boats and all that comes with PJ Fleck?
A lot of lakes in Michigan.
Yeah, right. Not as many as Minnesota.
I know. He's losing the battle there.
I think that's a question, and I think that's something that keeps PJ Fleck from being coveted, even when he's had his best years at Minnesota, by the likes of a USC. Or a Michigan, if it were to have an opening, because those schools absolutely not. They are not allowing him to bring in everything that he does with the quirkiness and the different cultural pieces that make P.J. Fleck what he is and has turned Minnesota into a consistent bowl team. Michigan State might be a little more open to that. They kind of need a rebrand, to be honest with you. The athletic department as a whole needs a rebrand. And if they become Row the Boat U, that's not the worst thing in the world.
Well, here's a name that I think is interesting, because what did Michigan State do last time they needed a head coach? They went and found the Colorado coach who'd been there for 1 year and made some progress there. Do they go after Prime?
Ooh, I don't know if
Deion leaves, but I said the same about Mel Tucker after 1 year. I said he's only 1 year into his build. Why would he leave now? But then Michigan State goes and throws the bag at him.
He's going to Michigan State because he knows that if I do my job in 2 years, I can get him for $9.5 a year.
They might go after his offensive coordinator.
Oh, yeah. That's a good thought.
Yeah, Sean Lewis, the former Kent State head coach at Kent State, is doing obviously a really nice job with Deion this year as the brains behind that offense. I think he'd be an excellent candidate. I mean, why not though? If you're Michigan State, go ahead. See if you can throw $10 million at Deion Sanders and make him
say no.
You're not going to have to pay Mel Tucker, it would appear. Mm-hmm. So
no.
I'm all for it. I don't think he would do it. I think when he moves on from Colorado, it's going to be for a bigger job than that. It's kind of a lateral move from Colorado to Michigan State, especially right now with where he's put Colorado in a short period of time. I wouldn't leave the mountains for East Lansing. I'll tell you that. But it's worth asking. I'd make the phone call.
You make him say no, I think.
Well, and he'd do it. I think Deion wants to end up in Texas or Florida, but we'll see how long he sticks in Boulder. The Average Joe Sports Show, episode 5, winding down. Find us on YouTube, the AJ Sports Show. Subscribe there. The Twitter feed, AJ Sports Pod, is where you can also follow us there, and then the iTunes and, yes, Spotify is where you download the podcast. Guys, 3 games to look at: Colorado, USC, Notre Dame, Duke, KU, Texas. We'll start with the Buffs and USC. Colorado down to earth, clearly, from what Oregon did, but SC 21-point favorite, a beat-up bunch of Buffs, Bill.
Well, you're going to have, I think, a large California contingent at the game in Boulder because there's so many Californians who now live in Califrado, is what it is known as, right? So I don't think you're going to have that home field atmosphere that Colorado, tried to enjoy against Nebraska. Not that USC fans are as passionate as Nebraska fans are, but after what happened at Oregon, there's going to be there's a little subdued out in Boulder. It's also there's some snow on the mountains. So people are heading for the hills, this weekend. But I don't think they're going to have that home field environment that they did like for the Colorado State game, for example. And they were humbled, no doubt about it, at Oregon. And I think this is the kind of game that Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and that whole staff is ready to put their stamp on, much the way Dan Lanning and the Ducks did last week.
But I do think a difference between Oregon and USC is that Oregon's defense is further along than what USC is right now. And USC, they haven't had to worry about their defense with Caleb Williams and that offense. I think Colorado can hang around a little bit longer in this game. I still think USC runs away with it. I think their offense is just that good, and I do think they have a defense that's going to do enough against Colorado, but I do think Colorado will be able to at least score some points this week, unlike last week.
Well, Colorado, I should say USC can kind of name their score if their defense is even a smidgen better, Mitch, than it's been. Colorado's offensive tackles, stop me if you've heard this before, have had a problem with edge rushers, and Oregon put that on full display. USC has a similar type athlete.
23 sacks. That's the number right now that Colorado has allowed through 4 games. I'm looking at USC's defense, and yeah, it wasn't great to start the year, but they've been okay the last couple of weeks. Gave up 28 at Arizona State last week. I think like 56-24, maybe something
one of those.
Like that. So, I mean, what's the over on this game? I'd probably take it, whatever it is. And I think USC is gonna cover the number. It's like 3 touchdowns, 21, 22 points. Shedeur Sanders, I'll continue to say it every week, and we talk about Colorado every week, but he credit to him for not being hurt. All of the names that have come into Colorado this year are starting to go down. Travis Hunter, unfortunately, on a bad play against Colorado State, he went down, out for several weeks. Now Shiloh Sanders, Deion's other son on the team, as a top defensive back, he's out after running his mouth at Oregon in the pregame. He went down with a kidney injury. Was peeing blood on the way home from Eugene. Don't expect that he's going to be out there in this game just based on the medical report. I know they said they're hoping to have him, but I'll believe it when I see it. Shedeur has stayed in this thing despite getting hit over and over, and at some point that may end for him. His luck might run out, and you hope that it's not on a blind side from a 270-pound USC defensive end, because despite the fact that they're giving up points, they have athletes who can get after the passer.
And it should be noted the total for this game by Vegas set at 74 points.
Wow. Well, that's a number. Texas and Kansas, Jayhawks -16. I remember 2 years ago that marathon overtime affair where Lance got the win in Bevo Land.
He did, 57-56 last time they went to Austin. I don't see it this time.
No.
You know, they got Texas, Kansas has Texas's attention. They've won 2 out of the last 6 against the Longhorns, which, hey, if you're Kansas, that's pretty darn good.
That's impressive.
I mean, Nebraska couldn't do that against Texas in the years of the Big 12, so not to bring that up. But you got a good quarterback matchup in this one with Jalen Daniels at Kansas. He's healthy this year and has been doing great work. That's why Kansas is 4-0 going into this thing. And they've got wins against Illinois and then BYU last week in the Big 12 opener. So Texas has also got Oklahoma on its mind a bit. The Red River game is next week in Dallas, but I think Kansas fully has Texas's attention, and Texas continues to roll. They go to 5-0, and I don't think they cover though.
16.
Yeah, no, Kansas will cover.
I think it's unfortunate scheduling for Kansas because if they could have had them last week after the win at Alabama,
right,
that would have been prime time for Kansas to perhaps steal another one, but they've gone through the week. They beat Baylor, did Texas, and now you've just have your sights set on moving forward. Yeah, Oklahoma's ahead, and that's going to be a pretty good matchup, without no question about it. But as much as we all like Lance Leipold, I don't think it's going to be a good weekend for him.
You know how much it's just eating at everyone in the Big 12 that Oklahoma and Texas are good this year. I mean, historically, that's been the case, but there hasn't been a year in recent seasons where they've both been like this or appear to be like this, and then they've
playoff contenders.
They've had their struggles. This year, of all years, you know, kind of like the Pac-12, where like karma is getting the best of everyone. It's the opposite of that in the Big 12 because Texas and Oklahoma should be suffering the fate of what the decision that they made a couple years ago, and they look like they're on a collision course where next week in Dallas could determine the Big 12 leader at least. Maybe they'll have a rematch.
I'm kind of with you guys just on this game with Kansas and Texas, though. I got Texas winning this one. I got Kansas covering the spread. I think we'll find out a lot about that Texas win over Alabama in terms of how serious it was. Where is Alabama at this year, this upcoming weekend? But I got 34-24 Texas getting the win.
Does Ohio State beat Notre Dame twice? They go to Duke. Duke's got game day for the first time. Irish -6.5. I'm super impressed by Notre Dame, except for their math skills.
Yeah, that's my question with this performance here
and
against Duke.
That's great at math.
Does Notre Dame actually get 11 guys on the field this week? That's going to be a big question.
9 defensive players this week. You know, go the other direction.
I would love to see. Well, I guess we will see because game day is there, right? The signs in the crowd that have to deal with math and counting and. Like the count from Sesame Street and counting to 10 and time.
1, 2, 3.
You know those are coming.
Those are all right. But no, I mean Notre Dame's super talented. I think they survive.
I think they get right. Yeah, I think Notre Dame pulls it out. That number looks kind of scary to me, 5.5. It looks just about right. I'll take the Irish. They win by 6.
Give me Duke outright.
You really?
Whoa.
Wow.
I think there's been a lot of people
wearing your Leitner jersey
hating on that Clemson team this year. I think Duke put up a really impressive performance against them this year. They had the home fans behind them for that one. I think the home fans show up yet again for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna use that energy. I think it's a special season for Duke. I think they walk-off field goal win it 24-21.
Special season for Duke, and then they lose their coach somewhere.
Yeah, he might actually coach himself above the Michigan State job.
Sure.
I mean, Mike Elko, you got to win against Clemson. A 28-7 win against Clemson. If you beat Notre Dame, I mean, they have Florida State coming up here in a couple weeks, October 21st. Yeah, I mean, he might want to leave before that game. Can he go to the Michigan State job's open? Can he go like on October 15th to Michigan State?
Or are you saying
somewhere else?
Or are you saying that he's going to take the Oregon job when Dan Lanning takes the job at Alabama when Nick Saban surprisingly steps down from the Crimson Tide at the end of the year?
That's some 3D thinking.
Doleman's got this whole list of Monopoly and dominoes.
I like it. Can we get James Franklin into this discussion? I want him to be in there because I know we're not discussing this game with Penn State.
Coffee. We're going to talk coffee.
Going to Northwestern. But where is he getting his coffee on Saturday morning in Chicago. I mean, there's so many options. He's in Evanston, along Lake Michigan. He can go anywhere to get his coffee, and he's just going to go get some boring black coffee because that's what James Franklin drinks.
It's punishment. It's punishment with fasting.
Are you saying he's going to Chicago to see what it's like in Arlington, perhaps, where there might be a new building, or?
Oh, he's going to be the Bears coach.
Oh, I don't know. Well, we're going to play this game. I love playing this kind of game, but I'm a little afraid for James Franklin. I mean, it's Northwestern week, and you're talking about whether you put cream in your coffee or you take it black. I think Northwestern's going to take this personal.
They are. It is personal.
They'll take it personal and cover
disrespect.
The 24. Is it? What is that number? Is it 34? It's 27. It's somewhere in between.
I reached out to our Penn State writer Audrey Snyder because I wanted to hear how it came that James Franklin grew a personality here in this 2023 season, and goes on his. If you haven't seen it, he goes on his Zoom call with all of the media, and he made everyone tell them how they take their coffee. Because apparently James Franklin is doing this intermittent fasting, and he can only drink black coffee, and he really wants to get a lot of input about how many calories are in everybody's coffee, and if they like it with milk. Right.
Can I just throw something in here? Intermittent fasting, used it this spring, fantastic. A+ from Elijah Herbel. You might be a little hungry before you go to bed or when you wake up in the morning. It works great.
Did it for a year, and it stops working.
You know what they say about intermittent fasting? Is the first rule of intermittent fasting is don't talk about intermittent fasting. No. So James Franklin is just defying that one to every level that he can. He's talking about it, and it's being broadcast around the world. So I don't know, for that reason.
I like that guy, too.
Yeah, I'm taking him off the coaching carousel for that reason. And I would like to talk to him about coffee, though. That would be fantastic.
That'd be all right.
But back to football here. I will say this. I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now. I think Penn State is the best team in the Big Ten this year. I don't think the disrespect towards Northwestern matters. I think they win. Really? I think they win big.
Oh, going bold then.
Yeah, bold. I think they win big against Northwestern. I think Penn State runs the table this year. I've been really impressed with what I've seen from them.
And for the record, I love the coaching carousel game. I love the coaching carousel.
It's good. No back-to-back field stormings at Northwestern. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, The Average Joe Sports Show, Episode 5 in the books. Subscribe to us and do so on iTunes or Spotify and YouTube channel, The AJ Sports Show. Find us on Twitter/X, The AJ Sports Pod. Back at you to talk Michigan next week.